Oh, smoke.
Let's say there. So, Shavua Tov. I don't know. We can't say Shavua Tov as someone you don't see for a week, but it's in the middle of the week. Anyways, after Purim Sameach, I decided to continue Megillot. So I have a plan. Whoever's gonna hold on to learn Shir Shirim, maybe for 2 sessions, and then we'll see what we'll do towards Pesach, because there's a minhag to read Shir Shirim on Pesach. And then after Pesach, Mataishu, we could also do Megillat Ruth towards Shavuot. Eicha, I'll let you learn on your own. It's too sad to do it in a public situation. But Shir Shirim is one of my favorites, maybe because of my name. So I'm excited to learn it. But it's also a very problematic book to learn. So I'm gonna need your help. Also with the English, because my English is not strong enough. The more it gets, I guess, poetry. So I'll need your help, and also with understanding. Shir Shirim was a big controversy already in the times of Chazal, when they were establishing the canon and deciding which books will be put into the Tanach. So Shir Shirim was one of those which was like not supposed to be put in the Tanakh, was supposed to be censored, together with Megillat Esther and Kohelet and all these parts of the Tanakh which are not so religious or not so, I would say, classic. I mean, we've been learning in the past few months that there's no part of the Tanakh that is so classic, but it was less, I guess, clear that it needs to be part of the Tanakh. And already in the times of Chazal, it was there was a discussion, and it was brought into the Tanakh and being part of the Tanakh, even though similarly to Megillat Esther, these are the only books of the Tanakh that God's name is not mentioned. So that's a big thing in the book. And obviously, poetry and songs, love songs, between man and woman, with such a, I would say, intimacy and erotic context in it, was not something that Chazal were running to put in the Tanakh. But hopefully we will learn it a little bit and see why, anyways, not only that it was put in the Tanakh, Rabbi Akiva says that Shir Shirim is, all the books of the Tanakh are Kodesh, and Shir Shirim is Kodesh Kodeshim. The way Shir Shirim is like the Song of Songs, so it's also the holiest part of the Tanakh. So hopefully we'll look into that. Yes, I will try to learn it. Yeah, Leslie.
Really quick question. So it's known as the highest of all the Megillot?
That's how it's written. Rabbi Akiva, if I'm not mistaken, in the Mishnah says that phrase, that Kol HaKtuvim Kodesh, that all the scriptures are holy, but Shir Shirim is the holy of holiest.
Got it.
Right? And I said, I think similarly, a comment last week, when you say about something that it's the best, so it's kanires because people think it's not, right? You have to always say something is the best when you have someone who thinks that it's not so, right? So when you say that it's the holy of holiest, it's because, as we say in Hebrew, al panav, if we look at it, it doesn't seem like the holy of holiest. It seems maybe the opposite. So that's the beauty of the depth of the Torah, is that what seems to us further from God is actually could be much closer.
Like Purim.
Like Purim, exactly.
Okay.
That Purim is considered in many ways the highest or holiest day, even more than Yom Kippur. Even more than Yom Kippur is Purim. So because it's so afar, the depth of it is so much deeper. So what in a traditional way is usually learned that Shir HaShirim is an analogy, and that's why it's so holy, because obviously it's not coming, we didn't come to put in the Tanach a song that speaks about, or songs that speak about love between a man and a woman. That's too cheap. So obviously it's speaking about Am Yisrael and the relationship between Am Yisrael and God. That's the analogy that we usually say, that Chazal bring in the Midrashim. And that's true. There's another analogy that is common to say, that that there's the not as a people, not as Am Yisrael, as a nation, but as a person, our neshama, the relationship between our neshama and God, right? Our spiritual aspect, and as in our own identity, and the godly identity is like a relationship between lovers, man and woman. Rav Steinsaltz in his commentary just brings the common knowledge that don't think that that this concept of analogy for a love story is an apologetic part of Chazal, right? What could some think? Some think that really it was a love story, but then Chazal sort of, as we say, made it Jewish, right? They kind of threw it into the mikvah and said, no, it's not a love story. It's a story about God and Am Yisrael. But Rav Steinsaltz shows that historically, in the period of the Tanach, there were other nations around here that they were found that in their scriptures also used analogies of love, relationships of intimacy and love, to relate to the different gods and different morals that they wanted to give over. So this concept of having something that's an analogy is not something that was far, or something that Chazal made up. It was actually part of the Tanakh, part of the Pshat of the world that Chazal lived in. What is Shir HaShirim? So if we look at the word itself, Shir HaShirim, the way we translated it, I translated at the beginning, it's the song of songs. Shir HaShirim. And soon in a moment we'll look in the text, but it seems like Shir HaShirim is like the song, the best song of all songs. That's one interpretation of the expression Shir HaShirim. Other interpretations, which I think are more pshat, it's Shir HaShirim, it's sung with many songs in it. And one of if we go with that explanation, so then when we read the text of Shir HaShirim, it basically brings us a collaboration of a couple of different poems. And there were different scholars and Parshanim who tried to identify the different poems on their own. And they were put together as one song. But it could be helpful to understand that. Why is that important to understand? Because it's very hard to read Shir HaShirim as a regular story, as regular prose. Why? Because it's hard to follow through what is happening. I don't know if anyone has read it or remembers exactly what the story is. What is the story of Shir HaShirim? It's very, very complicated, and we'll try to follow through it, but who went where, who said what to who, right? It's very unclear. And therefore saying that it's different poems that were put together makes sense that that it's not 100% correlated in correlation. It's not 100% a story. Rav Steinsaltz again, and I'm going to quote him a lot because he has beautiful pirush on Shir Shirim. He says the word Shir in the Tanach, it means also a ring. If you see in different places in Tanakh and in the language of Chazal, the word Shir also means a ring, and it's brought in different psukim when it speaks about women's jewelry. So one of the jewelries that are mentioned as tabat and as you would say Shalhevet or Anak, different names of jewelry. One of the names is Shir or Sher, depends how you read it. And Steinsaltz says basically Shir Shirim is like a chain of rings, one inside each other, right? So one ring inside each other, and which are attached.
Is that like Sharsheret?
Like Shalhevet, exactly. The word Shalhevet comes from the word Shir, right? Shir, because a Shalhevet has many rings that are attached to each other and make it into one large ring or one
Like
large
links.
Length, right?
Links. Link.
What does that mean?
Link.
Link. Okay, that's a new word to me.
It's like this. Like
right.
Things that are linked, like a fence or a necklace.
Right, exactly. So that's Rav Steinsaltz explains that when you have Shir Shirim, basically you have to look at it as a ring that's inside a ring, and in every part stands on its own, but every part is put into the other part, and that's what ties them together. So you could look at every piece of the poem on its own, and you could look at them all together. If you look at it on its own, you get its part, but when you put them all together, you get the depth of how things are connected and how things create one big story. So we should have that in mind. And now the last part of the introduction, and then we'll start learning. I, a while ago, a couple of years ago, learned Shir Shirim and tried to mamash learn with a lot of commentary and understand it. And I was trying to understand the poetry and what's going on. And eventually it sort of clicked to me how we need to read the book. And I'm going to read it that way. I'll share it with you. You could comment for it or against it, but I believe that we need to read it as a play. Mamash, as you could read a play or watch a play. Why is that? Because a play is exactly that. I'm speaking about a classic play, like Greek. I'm not so familiar, but the little bit that I learned or read, a Greek play or even Shakespeare, where there's sort of a plot, but the power of a play, as opposed to a story, as opposed to prose, is that you're sort of thrown into scenes. There's a scene and another scene and another scene, and every scene is very, very intense. But together, they're put together into a story. So if you see, right, and a play never starts in the beginning, right? They never start. You're always thrown into some situation, and you need to figure out throughout the story, throughout the play that you're reading or watching, what's going on. And I think that Shir Shirim is really built that way. And I have a couple, I would say, proofs that it's written that way. And it makes it fascinating because then it places a book in the Tanach that's written in a very modern way as opposed to biblical. First of all, that point that I said that the scenes stand on its own, right? It has to do with those shirim, with those sort of circles that stand on their own but connected. And the building a play usually is built on the main character, right? Who has a conflict or some clash with a different character or other characters. And the whole play happens through dialogues, meaning that a classic play, there isn't so much happening except for people talking about what happened and what's going to happen. And at the end, somebody killed someone. But the actual hour and a half that you're sitting there and watching the play, you're basically watching people talk, right? And the dialogues have the intensity of the depth in it. And all of Shir HaShirim is based on dialogues. We're gonna see what's called the re'aya, the female figure talking mostly. It seems, and Rav Steinsaltz points this out, it seems like she is the main figure, as opposed to the male figure, the man who is the lover, and he also speaks and he also has his parts, but he's less intense and less in the, I would say, front than her. The second thing is that the stage, the scenery changes, just as a play, right? In between the parts, you see the scenes are happening in different places, and every place has a lot of meaning to what's happening in that place. And the third thing is that there's a choir, a chorus in this play, and that is very important because the place of a choir is to give feedback to the dialogue, right? So if we're going to see the lover speaking, somebody's going to have to speak back to her or sort of relate back to what she's saying, and that's going to be a choir, which we're going to see is throughout reading the Megillah. So I spoke too much, and we could start. The book starts, Shir HaShirim Asher Li Shlomo. This is not part of the actual poem. This is the koteret, the headline of the book. And it's interesting that it's Asher Li Shlomo. Some commentaries say that it means that it's the song of songs that Shlomo HaMelech wrote, that he himself wrote. And Rav Steinsaltz loved quoting this, that they say that, I think I said this in one of the shurim, that Shlomo HaMelech wrote 3 books. He wrote Shir HaShirim, Mishlei, and Kohelet. So one opinion in the Midrash says that when he was young and all, right, vital, so he wrote the Song of Songs, which is romance. And then he got smarter and he wrote the book of Mishlei, which gives, in his middle age, he gave everybody the words of wisdom. And then before he died, he wrote Kohelet, which is this very existential sort of way of looking at the world and saying everything is bad, right? Havel avalim, it's all nothing, and very pessimistic. But Steinsaltz said that you could also read it the opposite. You could say when he was young and he looked at the world, he was very pessimistic, so he wrote Kohelet. He thought nothing is worth it. Then he became smart, he wrote Mishlei, he gave everybody etzot. But then when he was old, he understood that there was nothing left except for romance. So he wrote the book of Shir HaShirim. And I think that the quoting Shlomo HaMelech here, we don't know, his name is going to be quoted a few times. We don't know if the songs are about him or he was interested in this way, but we do know that Shlomo HaMelech was interested in many ways of communication. And it says that he was able, it says in Sefer Melachim, he was able to, every concept that he wanted to give over, he was able to give over in 3,000 mishalim, in 3,000 parables or analogies to give over a point. And that's That's one of the interesting things here. It also throws us to know, and we learned this together also, that Shlomo HaMelech had sinned with women. He had an issue. He had 1,000 women, and it was questionable, did he love them, or was it political inyan? But the bottom line is that he married 1,000 women. So a love song is sort of contradictory to his life, because the poem would be about one woman and one man who love each other, right? And some sort of, right, ideal kind of love, or maybe that's what Shlomo HaMelech was looking for. So this is just the opening of the book. Now the poem starts. And as I said, it starts like this. Ishakeni min shikot piu, ki tovim dodecha miyain. Right? Oh, give me the kiss of your mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Now, who's talking to who? Who's speaking here? Who is speaking to who? Going back to looking at this as a play, right? Imagine sitting there in front of the stage, and then someone soon will see that this is the young woman, sort of runs into the stage and starts talking very ecstatically. Ishakeni min shikot piu ki tovim dodecha miyain, lereach shmanecha tovim, shemen turak shemecha, al ken alamot aevucha. Right? You have such great what is this? Anointments that you have, the ointments and your fragrance and the smell that's coming out of you is so beautiful, and all the women, therefore all the maids love you. And she's obviously in love with the best person that everybody wants to be with, right? And she says to him, Mashcheni acharecha narutza. Eviani hamelech hadarav, nagila v'nismecha bach, nazkira dodecha miyain meisharim ha'evucha. Draw me after you, let us run. The king has brought me to the chambers. Let us delight and rejoice in our love, savoring it more than wine. Like new wine, they love you. Like new wine, they love you. This is a very complicated pasuk that we need to stop and learn it a little bit in depth and try to understand what's going on here. She's saying, Ishakeni min shikot piu ki tovim dodecha miyain. She's speaking about this this person that she loves, who, right, she has the most delightful, more than wine, tastes the best, smell the best, look the best, right? Everyone loves him. And then she says to him like this, Mashcheni, pull me, draw me after you. Narutza, I'm just to understand the grammar of this pasuk is very difficult. Narutza means we will run together. And so she's speaking to the person she loves, and she says, draw me after you and we will run together. But then she says, Hevi'ani hamelech chadarav. The king has brought me to his chambers. So who is him and who is the king? You understand the problem? Mm-hmm. She's speaking to someone, Mashcheni acharecha, please draw me after you. The king has brought me to his chambers. The king is in third person, and she's speaking to someone in second person, Mashcheni acharecha, in the beginning. So she's moving here from the second person to the third person. And then she's referring back to the togetherness, Nagila v'nismecha bach. We will be happy and rejoice in you. Nazkira dodecha miyain, will remember or savoring them, right, that you're more than wine, meisharim ha'evucha. So what's going on in this pasuk? Any ideas? I'll say in a moment the Perushim I found, but just if anyone wants to take a try how to understand who's she speaking to.
Well, it could be the same person.
It could be the same person. And then what is she saying?
Yeah. She's wants her loved one to draw him in, and then she's saying the king has brought me, like in talking in like sort of an honorable way. That's how you talk to a person. You can say you, and then you can say my lord. Like the same person.
Exactly. So that's one of the perushim. And if it's like that, like you're saying, so he's basically not a king. And according to that way, that pirush, she has someone she loves. And maybe we'll see from the continuation of the story, he's not a king, he's a regular shepherd, just like her. But she's in love with him, and she says, draw me after you. And then when I'll come after you and you'll bring me into your house, you'll be like my king, right? That's what you're saying. If I understand your pirush. You'll be like my king. That's explanation number one. If we go according to that explanation, so then we're speaking here about two lovers that are equal, right? Equal in their status, and she's really wanting to be drawn after her. Now, Mashcheni acharecha is a very interesting thing to say to someone, right? She's saying to him, I want to be drawn after you. Please, I'm here. Just take me, right? This very intense, I'll come after you, but I need you to take me. And once you bring me into your chambers, you'll become my king. Another explanation is the exact opposite, is that she's actually loving the king himself. So she's telling the king, if you draw me in, I'm outside. I'm not a queen. I'm a simple person. You need to draw me into your chambers, and I will become part of the king. Those are the two, I would say, simple explanations. But can
we think that maybe there's a third person here?
Oh, so that's the third explanation. What is that going to be then?
That it's between her and her lover, and that the king is an outside force that sort of has something to do with her, something. We don't know yet.
That's the tragic explanation, which obviously if it's tragic, it's the best, in my opinion. He's saying, Mashcheni acharecha narutza.
That's what it feels like.
Exactly. And it's not me who made this up. The Malbim brings it, and other big, Ibn Ezra says something similar. Draw me after you, I can come. But if you draw me after you, I will run after you because the king has taken me to his chambers already.
It feels like something that Esther could be saying to her boyfriend.
Exactly. This is mamash resignating Esther, who's saying, Mordechai, please come, take me out of here and I'll run after you and we'll live in the caves. I don't care where. Just take me out of the king's chambers. Now, this is creating something that the whole poetry here becomes different, because she's speaking about the real love, the more ecstatic love, the one that she knows, while she's taken into something that she is forced into. I don't know which one is true. All three explanations are good. But we have to have them in mind, and when we read it, we'll try to see what happens here. So I'm continuing. Shchora ani v'nava bnot Yerushalayim. She continues her, I said dialogue is between two people. Over here, up to now, it might have been a monologue, right? When she speaks, not so clear who she's speaking to. Now it's becoming a dialogue. And this is where I spoke about the choir. The choir kicks in mamash here. Who's the choir? Bnot Yerushalayim. Bnot Yerushalayim are her peers in Yerushalayim, the girls of Yerushalayim. So she's saying, Shchora ani v'nava. I am dark, but I'm beautiful. And she's saying this to Bnot Yerushalayim. Why is she saying this to Bnot Yerushalayim? Because Bnot Yerushalayim are not dark. And in their eyes, dark is not beautiful. Who is dark? Darks are the shepherds. Darks are the girls who are walking around in the sun and working hard. But Bnot Yerushalayim are the girls of the city. They're the urban part of society who are sitting there and beautifying themselves just to wait for their chatan, right? And walking on tippy toes. And she's saying to them, you think I'm dark, but I'm beautiful. Daughters of Yerushalayim, Bnot Yerushalayim, ke'oalei kedar, keriot Shlomo. I'm like the tents of the Kedar, or like the Yeriot, which are what is this? Pavilions of Solomon. So she's saying, I am like the Oalim. Oalei Kedar. Kedar were like Bedouins who would be scattered around, and they would have these beautiful tents. What seems to you as something that is ugly or dirty, it's beautiful because I'm able to give shelter. I'm able to be a tent, right? She's she's comparing herself to the Yeriyot of Shlomo, the King Shlomo's
tents. The walls of
tents. And she says to them, Al tiruni shani shcharchoret. Don't think that I'm dark. Sheshazafatni hashamesh. You're telling me that the sun had hit me and made me dark. Bnei imi nicharu bi. Now she's bringing another aspect into the story. Bnei imi nicharu bi. My brothers from my mother. What does it mean, my brothers from my mother? It means that her father had many wives, right? So she has other brothers also from her father. But the brothers from her mother should be those who are closer to you. The brothers from the mother are usually those who are more closer or right, caring to the woman, to the girl, than the other brothers from the other mother. We know this from stories in the Tanach, for example, the story of Amnon v'Tamar, right, where we have a story where the sons of David, where one of the sons of David raped the daughter of David from a different woman. So we know that there was tension between if you're a brother from the father or from the mother. But she says, my brothers from my mother had been harsh to me. Why? Samuni notra et akramim. They put me out to guard the vineyards. But my own vineyard I didn't guard. What is she trying to say here? She's saying, you're looking at me that I look ugly, or I look dark, or I'm not as fancy or as presentable as I need to be as a woman, or as a young maid, you don't know what I went through. My brothers had thrown me into a situation where I had to work and guard and be outside, while my own self I couldn't take care of. Mm-hmm. So first she says, I'm beautiful even though I'm dark. But now she's giving the painfulness of where it came from. And she's continuing. Hagida li shava nafshi, echa tir'eh, echa tarbiz b'tzarayim. Shalma eya keotia al edrei chaverecha. And she says again now, this, I'm saying it's very ecstatic because she's moving from who she's speaking to. She was speaking to the girls, to what I call the choir. And now she's going and she's saying, tell me where my loved one is. And where is the love? Eicha, right? Eicha is something usually very, we know that from Megillat Eicha, from a place in the Tanach where the word Eicha appears. It's a sad question. Where is my beloved, how do you say shepherding? No, that's not the word. Pastors your sheep. Where do you pastor your sheep? Right? Where do you rest for noon? What is she looking for? She's looking for him in the middle of his work, which is not the time to go and to go out for a date, in the middle of somebody's work. But she's looking for him everywhere. Right? Let me not be as one who strays beside the flocks of your fellows. I'm looking for you. Now, Pasuk Chet is the first time in Megillah
the Pasuk the lava. When she says Hagida li, she's not talking to the.
Which Pasuk?
Now I'm talking to him.
She's gone back to talking.
That's what it seems like. She's moving from speaking to them to him. That's why I said that it's so helpful to look at it as a play, because in a play, in a monologue, you could speak to someone who's not in front of you. It's part of the trick of writing a play, is that she's able to speak to the world. And when she's speaking out there, that's the intensity of this girl, because she's burning with love and with the need to find her mate. We saw that maybe she's even captured in a place where she doesn't want to be in, according to some of the explanations of what's going on here. And she's bursting out and she's speaking to her peers, but then right away speaking to him. And now onto the stage, suddenly Don Juan comes in and speaks up. And he says to
Shlomo.
her, yeah. Well, the dog hasn't what to say, so when you're ready, you could speak up. But Pasuk Chet, he says to him, "Lo tedhi lach hayafa banashim, tzi lach beikvei atzon, uri et gdiyotaich al mishkenot haroim." If you don't know, my beautiful woman, the most beautiful woman in the world, if you don't know where I am, go out with your sheep and go follow the tracks of your sheep and see by Mishkenot Arayim, go between the tents of the shepherds. What is he saying to her?
Finally.
Right? Or maybe what is she hearing? What is echoing to her? What are you standing here and yelling? Go out and look for him. Go out and do something. If you don't know where he is, look for him. Look for him. You know he's a shepherd? Look for him between the shepherds. Look for him between the tents of the shepherds. You have, if you're looking for something, and you know what you're looking for, so go to the place where you could find it, where you would probably find it. If you were looking for a king, so go to the palace. But if you're looking for a shepherd, go to the shepherds.
Can I ask my question?
Okay, should we continue?
My dog is quiet. My question is, I know that you talked about the kind of chorus, the Greek chorus that's there in the background, but is there also an intention of writing this with an audience in mind or the reader in mind? Like, is she also, when she kind of gives those statements, like when she's talking about being dark or the exposition, explaining why, is there a consciousness of the reader or the audience being part of this play, or you think it's like a closed, more of a closed set? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think to understand it, we need to do two things. We need to do what we're doing now, is basically understanding what's written here as is. Which, by the way, in very Orthodox places, they would say that what I did right now is like the worst thing in the world, because I read it without we read this together as a love story. We did not give I would say, the religious content into it yet. But I think the next stage is the audience is not the love story. The audience is the analogy to us. And what do we do with such an intense story? That would be the answer to who is this spoken to, right? Because if we're speaking about, and I'll just give an example, it's much deeper than this, but if you want to do it like on the surface, so if we'll take this as a midrash, so Am Yisrael is scattered in the galut and telling all her friends, Bnot Yerushalayim, all the other nations, don't think that we are so bad or don't think that we are so low, right? I was put into a place that I wasn't supposed to be, right? I was put into a place, I'm now guarding. That's part of what they say that the galut is. What is galut? Is to guard other people's vineyards, but not your own. That's what you're doing in New Jersey. You're taking care of other people's vineyards, but your own vineyard is not taken care of. So that's what Chazal would say, right? And then comes God and says, well, if you're looking for me, come to Eretz Yisrael. Now, I'm saying this in a joke because, and not that I don't think that it's true, but I think that it's not deep enough to just stay on that surface of analogy, because the story is more intense than that. So then also the nimshal needs to be deeper than that. You understand what I just said? I don't know if I explained myself.
No, you explained yourself very well.
Okay, because I feel like the ability to read this without explaining the analogy allows us to contain more and more depth of it later. Does that answer you, Ellie? I don't know if that's a kivun, if that's a... So now he speaks up and he has what to say for her. I say to young people, don't use these when you go out for a date, because it's not up to date. These are not the words a person says today to his beloved, but in the times of the Tanach, it seems like that's what people would say. Yeah, I've likened you, my darling, to May Pharaoh's chariots, because Paro had the most beautiful, the Egyptians had the most beautiful horses. Navul lechayayich batorim, tzavach b'charuzim. You're full of beautiful, your neck has strings of jewels. Torei zahav na'aseh lach im nekudot hakasef, right? I will add, we'll give you even more gold and silver. Ad she'hamelech bimsibo Nirdi natan recho. Now she's speaking again. How do we know this? From the next pasuk. Tzror amor dodili ben shadayalin. Eshkol hakofer dodili b'charmei En-Gedi. I'll translate. While the king was in his couch, bimsibo, or in his couch, or in his misiba, could also be in his celebration. Nirdi natan recho. Nered was a kind of a fragrance that the women would wear on them, and it would have to wait until it gives its sort of smell. What is she saying? While the king was dealing with other things, suddenly the fragrance, my smell was awakened. Tzror amor dadili ben shadayalin. Right? What is this? My beloved to me is a bag of mirth lodged between my breasts. My beloved to me is a spray of, what is that? Kofer, I don't know what is that. Henna? Henna blooms from the vineyards of En-Gedi. Some of the explanations here is going back to say that she's in a chamber where she doesn't want to be. So what is she saying? While the king was on his couch doing other things, that's when my fragrance were sort of blooming. How do you say? Were right getting their smell, because my love to my real beloved awakened. When is she able to really be who she is? To be the most beloved, to be the most powerful that she could be, when the king is not around, when he is leaving her, right? When he is doing other things. And that's a big thing, bichlal, that many great things happen when there's space, when there's air, when the people who are in control are for a moment not in control. One of the interesting things here, by the way, is that suddenly she says that it's like a eshkol kofer that she got from En-Gedi. Now, En-Gedi is going to appear a couple times, and I'll just give another comment from Rav Steinsaltz. Rav Steinsaltz says that there's something very interesting about this, about Shir HaShirim, is that it's very realistic. Why is it realistic? Because it's speaking about places, Yerushalayim, Bnot Yerushalayim, and Karmei En-Gedi, right? And it's speaking about real fragrance, and we're going to see real names of trees and real names of animals. And there's nothing here that is mythical. That's a myth. It's all very realistic on one hand. But on the other hand, there's something very much like a dream in this. And again, going back to it being like a play, that's what the play allows it to be sort of very grounded into reality, but using reality in a very free way, in a very dynamic way. And he continues to give her praises. Hinach yafa ra'ayati, hinach yafa einayich yonin. Now it becomes a dialogue, because she says in the same words. He says to her, "You are beautiful, my beloved. Your eyes are like dove-like eyes. And she's answering him, "Hincha yafe dodi, you're beautiful. Af naim, af arsenu ra'anana. You have a beautiful nose." I guess he was Jewish. But anyways, there's a dialogue here, right? They're saying, you're beautiful. And then they come up and they say, Korot batenu arazim, reitenu berotim. Berotim are like cedars. So the poles, right, or the beams of our house are made out of arazim, cedar wood, and reitenu, and so the walls or the furniture in our house what is she saying here, are also made out of the cedar. The cedar was the most expensive and best wood. We know that Shlomo HaMelech built Beit HaMikdash from cedar wood that he brought from Lebanon. They traveled from Lebanon to bring cedar wood so he could build Beit HaMikdash from the most powerful wood, from the most strongest wood. This saying says, we have an established relationship. You're beautiful, I'm beautiful, right? We have a house that's made out of cedar. We have a very established relationship.
Sturdy.
Sturdy and strong. Mm-hmm. Now, how is this? Again, I'm speaking about a song of songs. So this seems like a separate poem from the other poems we saw, right? Because she's speaking about a very sturdy, strong, established relationship, like a house that's made out of cedar. That's not what we heard a couple of psukim ago, where she might be in a different chamber, or she's looking for him and he's telling her, well, go, I'm out there somewhere in between the tents. This is another aspect that we need to connect to those aspects and start figuring out how do these connect together.
Shlomo,
yeah.
What you said between the reality part and the fantasy part, for some reason, when I read that pasuk about the cedars are the beams of our house, it didn't immediately strike me as talking about something built and sturdy. Like, I get that cedars are that type of trees, but more it felt like this kind of open air relationship, like that they have to make their way in nature because they don't actually have a real home together.
Well, that's another way of reading it, that it's sort of marking where they want to get to, right? Maybe that's what you're saying.
Or that they're like living under the trees. Do you know what I'm saying? Like in that sort of fanciful.
Okay, so the beams of our house is not a real house. We live under the cedar trees. Interesting.
Yeah, that's how. That's
about that. That could be, and then
that fit.
And
more
then that continues.
The theme of where we were.
Right. The only problem with that is that if she was speaking about En Gedi or in Yerushalayim, there's no cedar trees. So that's the question of reality and dream here. Right? Sort of, if you're how realistic do we need to read this pasuk? So I was reading it maybe more realistic, and you're taking it more in a free way, I would say.
Fantasy,
yeah, fantasy could be.
I keep on thinking of A Midsummer Night's Dream, but go ahead.
Shlomo?
Yeah.
Well, maybe Ali is saying, because we said earlier on that she must go find him amongst the herds, the shepherds. So you look at that she's outside looking for him, and she comes in contact with him and says that we're like as if we're under the cedar trees.
Right, which is a shelter that's outside, a natural shelter as opposed to a.
Because she was looking for
real
him
house.
in herds, which is outside.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. But it seems like this up to now the poem was it was happening either in Yerushalayim or in front of the girls of Yerushalayim or out there in the herds, right out there and with the. But now the next pasuk, we're in chapter 2, number 1. Ani chavatzeret Hasharon, Shoshanat ha'amakim. She says, I'm a rose from the Sharon. The Sharon is, today we call the area of Tel Aviv Sharon, or I'm a lily from the valley. What is she saying here? She's saying, I'm beautiful, like a rose or like a lily, but I don't think Chavatzeret, by the way, is a rose. I don't know what this translation is from, but maybe. But anyways, in modern Hebrew, Chavatzeret is a different, but it doesn't mean that it's true what modern Hebrew says. But anyways, she's saying, I'm not from here. I'm the most beautiful flower, but I come from the valleys. I'm not naturally, this is not my natural place. And he says to her, you know what, you're right. Keshoshana ben achochim, ken ra'ayati ben abanot. Like a lily amongst thorns is my darling amongst the maidens. Right? She's declaring, and over here we're going back to something that she approached, we're starting to realize throughout these love poems. What's happening here is that she feels very, very different and probably also very lonely because of that. She feels special, she feels beautiful, even though everyone thinks differently. She's different, she's zar. How do you say zar in English? I don't have the word. Strange, right? This feeling, this feeling of being strange amongst others, and this constant part of this constant thing throughout these love poems of checking myself towards others, right? What are the other girls? What are my peers are all about? The other girls of Yerushalayim, the other women. And over here, she's saying, I am something totally different. And I think she's saying this genuinely. My beauty, my strength is from the valleys, from far away. And he says to her, you're right. Now, what is Keshoshana ben achochim ken ra'ayati ben abanot? This is a pasuk that got a lot of interpretation and a lot of interest from the Darshanim. So one way is saying, well, you're beautiful and all who is around you are ugly thorns. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that the thorns are part of the actual, over here it says lily, or the rose has thorns around it. And the thorns are those who protect the beautiful flower. So they're sort of, right? He's saying to her, you're right. You're not you're the most beautiful one, but you need all those thorns around you to protect you. And that's also what makes it painful, right? The others who you're in between amongst them. So she needs to answer him. Ketapuach be'atzayar, we're in verse number 3. Ketapuach be'atzayar ken dodi ben abedim. Oh, I'm like a thorn. I'm like a lily between thorns. So you're like a fruit tree. Be'atzayar. Yar is many times trees that don't give fruit. That are, what do you call them? We say atzesrak. The trees in the forest are not fruit trees. Fruit trees are in orchards or in right? The fruit trees, and you say, oh, you're the one, you could give fruit as opposed to all the other men. Ken dodi ben abanim. Betzilo, in the shade of your tree, chimadeti ve'ashavti, I was right? Lachmod is to really want something. And I sat there, upiryo matok lechiki. So you're also able to give me shelter, and you're also able to give me, to sustain me, to give me food. That's the beauty of a fruit tree, that it also gives her shade from the sun, which we know that was something that hurt her, right? That being in the sun makes her dark. And you're also able to give me shelter and also able to give me, sustain me with food, with fruit. She speaks about him and she says, he brought me into the banquet room and gave me love and spread his love over me, I think. Diglo comes from, it's like the word dilug, to like jump over something. And he came over or bestowed upon me his love. this is where she's describing mamash intimacy, mamash being close to him. And now she goes back in Pasuk Hey. I'm reminding you, she's very ecstatic here. And she's going back to her friends, according to the commentaries that I learned.
Shlomo?
Yeah.
Because she's switching back into the third person there, is it possible that she's describing the king again?
That is possible if we're going according to the first Pirush, where the king and the beloved is the same. Then that works very, very well.
But what if it's not? What if it's the third Pirush and it's that the king took her and he's smothering her with his love?
I'm not sure, because I thought that I think when she says ahava, the word ahava is not used in a way where she's not connected to it. If it would be that forced action, she wouldn't use the term love.
The word ahava.
Even though
she might really feel like he loves her, but she doesn't love him back.
Right, so I don't think that would be diglo alay ahava. That would be, he bestowed upon me his other things.
Whatever,
but it wouldn't else. Be. I don't think so.
Okay.
And also we see it from the next pasuk where but according to the explanation, if you want to have correlation between all the poems, which I don't necessarily think needs to be, but if you do want, so this goes good with that pirush, that Beit Hayayin, right? Which maybe that's what you were trying to say. The Beit Hayayin gives this feeling of someone rich, someone who has chambers, who has, right, a banquet room, right? This is like the king. So then that goes well with that pirush, right? Yeah. But now she says to her friends or to her maids, Samchuni bashishot, Rapaduni batapuchim, Kicholat ahava ani. He says sustain, lismoch is to sort of hold on to me. Hold me with ashot, he says here, raisin cakes or something with beautiful smell. And rapduni batapuchim, refresh me with apples, right? Because I am faint with love. Or the Hebrew word chola is I am sick.
Lovesick.
Right? I'm lovesick. I am ill. And what is she saying? And this is the part where I see her on the stage falling, right? Like, I can't hold this, right? She's ill from love. And she's going to that chorus, to those girls who were standing before her a moment ago, where she had to fight for her honor, right? And now she's saying to them, hold on to me, sustain me, keep me being because I'm sick. And she's continuing, Smolot tachat leroshi, viminot echadkeni. I still feel, she's far from him, but she feels his left hand, right, under her head, sort of holding her up, and in his right hand, hugging her. And she says to these girls, Ishbati etchem benot Yerushalayim bitzvaot u'bayalot hasadeh. I am making you a jury, right? You must take an oath, the girls of Yerushalayim. Bitzvaot u'bayalot hasadeh. Im ta'iru ve'im toreru. Right? With all the, you should not do not wake and do not rouse the love until it pleases. Ad shetichpatz. What is she saying here? And these three psukim are very also well known and a lot explained to it, but we'll understand it first in Pshat. She's saying to them, please hold on to me. I'm ill out of love. I'm far from my beloved. Hold on to me. I feel him holding on to me. But don't go call him. Don't bring him before it's time. I don't want you to go and bring my beloved. I want him to come on his own. Ad shetechpatz, im ta'iru ve'im tareru et ahavat shetechpatz. Basically, she's saying, I'm almost gonna die here without him, but please hold on to me and sustain me with whatever I need, whatever you could give me, so I could handle the time that I need to wait until he comes on his own. Let it not be that you will bring him when it's not appropriate or when he's not awakened for it on himself, when it's not authentic on his side. Now, I see the time, so again, we did half of what I wanted to do, but I do want to go into the depth of these 3 psukim and also go a little bit and explain them in different levels of understanding. Samchuni bashot rabduni batapuchim, she says, give me whatever you can because I'm ill from love. Rav Fulman used to quote Rav Kook about this, which used to say that there is such a thing being sick, love sick. But Rav Kook used to say that you have to remember that's also an illness. It's not a beautiful thing to be ill from love. It's a sickness. It's painful, right? We could romanticize it and say, wow, she's so much in love with him that she's even willing to be sick, or she even gets sick out of love. But you have to know that loving into such a place of illness is very intense, but it's also very dangerous. She's putting herself into danger. And when she puts herself into danger, and this the psychologist between us could say that the most number one thing that needs to be done to someone who's sick is to ask for help. She knows that she's ill, and that's why she's saying, help me, I can't sustain myself anymore, hold on to me. She's going to those friends of hers, and the bottom line, your friends are your friends. If you love them or you can't stand them, they're there to be the people who are going to hold on to you when you fall down. And she says to them, please hold on to me. I need your help. And I think on a spiritual level, and as Am Yisrael, you know, if we want to go back to the analogy of what is happening here, Am Yisrael, or our neshama, is separate from the other part, from Hashem, from God, from the whole being of Am Yisrael in a complete way. Our neshama is, if our neshama is really awakened in love to connect to God, it becomes an illness. It becomes that, we see this with people who become really spiritual and lose it, right? They lose their boundaries. And that's when they need help from, I would say, the mainstream. These girls who represent the mainstream, who are there to hold on to her when she's in a crisis, a very deep and real crisis, but a crisis. But what she knows, and that's what makes it very real, is Pasuk Zayin. She makes them take an oath, Ishbat yatchem. All what I need you to do right now is to hold on to me, not to take action, not to solve my problems. Because the easiest thing is to go find this guy and tell him, listen, you broke this girl's heart. She's totally lost it. We need you to come and take care of her. but she knows that that's not real. She knows that that's not real, and she understands that what she needs to do is put herself into a place of waiting, into a place of recovering herself in one way, sustaining herself, but waiting for him. And taking this to a place in our neshama, I think that I don't know if you want to help me with this. I'm trying, but I think that that's a very deep place that a person could get to, where we have this yearning, this very intense love to something that's beyond our capacity, or it's not close to us as we feel that we need to be close to the elokut, to the godliness. But we know that we're not there, and what we need to do in such a situation is wait and not awaken the love before it awakened on its own. In Chassidut, Rav Steinsaltz also spoke about this a lot in Chabad they speak about this, is that you can't make emotions, right? It's impossible to tell a person to feel something. But what you could do is create an environment that awakens emotions. What she's saying here is that the other side is not there, and I'm going to wait for him, even though I'm going to be in pain right now. The last comment I'll say about this, and then we'll finish. This pasuk, Ishbat etchem not Yerushalayim, appears in Megillat Shir HaShirim 3 times in different versions, but very similar. And we'll see that next time, hopefully, when we learn. But these psukim, the Gemara says that Am Yisrael should not awaken the Geula before its time. We should not try to arouse the redemption of Am Yisrael in the Galut before its time. And that was one of the biggest controversies against the religious Zionists. We could put Rav Kook as the sort of head of all this, who was told to them, how could you come to Eretz Yisrael? It's not time yet. The Zionism is sort of doing what she's saying here not to do. That's awakening the love before it's time. And there's a famous essay by Rav Soloveitchik who explains why that Gemara doesn't apply to our generation or to our situation, and why B'chol Zot Zionism is the right thing to be part of. And it's a very famous essay by Rav Soloveitchik. So I'll conclude with this, that there's how could we conclude such a shiur? I feel like we need another 3 hours to go through this and sort of until we start even understanding something here. But I think what we could say is that we saw in these psukim, I'll go out of this when we conclude. We saw in these psukim different angles of a story. We do see a story that sort of evolves part after part. And we see here a story of a woman who's looking and searching for her beloved. She had a relationship with him. By the way, I didn't say this, but it's clear that the story starts in the middle. The story doesn't start with, there was once a couple who loved each other and then they were separated. We have to understand that on our own. It's clear that she knows who she's speaking about. This is not a dream. This is not a fantasy about someone she never met. This is someone that she knows someone she had a real relationship with, and she was separated from him. And now she has to yearn for him, wait for him, be ill because of him. She has to deal with society. She has to deal with maybe a third party, the king, who's taking over her. And these could be explained as different parts in life of our neshama being searching for the connection to what's above, to the initial, to the, I would say, primal relationship with God. So we'll try to continue next week from somewhere to somehow.
Thank you so much, Mo.
Thank
you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, thank